I used to believe my life was ordinary in the safest way possible, a predictable marriage, a familiar bed. A man who came home every evening and asked what I had cooked. I thought stability was love. I thought silence meant peace. That belief shattered the afternoon the old woman knocked on my door. It was raining, the kind of rain that felt heavy, as if the sky itself was tired. I was folding laundry when I heard the knock, soft, hesitant, almost apologetic. When I opened the door, I saw her standing there, soaked and trembling, her thin frame wrapped in a faded shawl. "May I have some water?" she asked. Her voice wasn't weak. It was broken. I hesitated for a second, then stepped aside. I didn't know why, but something in her eyes pulled me in. They carried a sadness that felt ancient, like grief that had outlived hope. I gave her a glass of water and offered her a chair. She held the glass with both hands as if it were the only warm thing left in her world. She looked around my living room slowly, at the wedding photo on the wall, at the neat sofa, at the little signs of a woman who believed she was loved. "You have a good home," she said quietly. I smiled, unaware of how cruel those words would soon become. She didn't drink the water right away. Instead, she stared at it, her fingers shaking. I asked if she was feeling unwell. She nodded, but not in the way sick people do. This was different. This was guilt. "I won't stay long," she said. "I don't have much time anyway." Something in my chest tightened. She finally looked at me, then really looked at me. Her eyes filled with tears, and suddenly she reached for my hand. Her skin was cold. "I have been coming here many times," she whispered. "Standing across the road, watching your door, asking myself if I have the right to speak." My heart started to pound. "About what?" I asked, half laughing nervously. She took a deep breath as if she were preparing to jump off a cliff. "My daughter," she said. "My daughter is your husband's lover." The room went silent. I waited for the punchline, for the explanation, for her to laugh and say it was a mistake. Instead, she lowered her head and began to cry. I pulled my hand away. "That's not funny," I said sharply. "You shouldn't joke about things like that." "I am not joking," she replied. "I am dying. I have no reason to lie." I stood up, anger rising, denial wrapping itself around my heart like armor. "You don't know my husband," she nodded. "I know his scar on the left shoulder. I know he hates bitter coffee. I know he leaves his phone face down when he lies." Each word felt like a slap. She told me things, small details, harmless on their own, deadly together. Things I had noticed but ignored. Things I had explained away with trust. I raised my daughter wrong, she said, her voice cracking. And I stayed silent too long, but I will not carry this sin into my grave. I wanted to scream. I wanted to throw her out. Instead, I stood there, frozen, watching my life rearrange itself in front of me. When she finally stood to leave, she paused at the door. "I am sorry," she said, not as a mother, as a woman. The door closed behind her. I didn't cry. I stood in the middle of my living room, staring at my wedding photo, realizing that sometimes the truth doesn't knock loudly. Sometimes it arrives soaked in rain, wearing an old shawl, and leaves your entire world in ruins. That night, my husband came home at his usual time. He kissed my forehead the way he always did, brief, distracted, routine. I watched his face carefully, searching for guilt, fear, or even hesitation. There was nothing, just comfort, just the ease of a man who believed he was untouchable. I realized then that betrayal doesn't always look cruel. Sometimes it looks confident. I didn't confront him, not because I was afraid, but because something inside me had gone still. The old woman's words echoed in my mind, refusing to fade. I lay beside my husband in bed, staring at the ceiling, listening to his breathing, wondering how long he had been sharing his body and his lies with another woman. Sleep never came. The next morning, I began to notice everything. The phone he kept face down on the table. The way he stepped outside to answer calls. The passwords I was suddenly locked out of. These were not new habits. They were old ones I had chosen not to question. Trust had made me blind, and love had kept me obedient. I started small. While he showered, I picked up his phone. My hands trembled so badly, I nearly dropped it. I didn't know the password, but I didn't need to. A message notification lit up the screen. I miss you already. The name was saved as Ria Office. My chest burned. I told myself names could lie, messages could be misunderstood, but deep down I already knew. Truth doesn't arrive as a surprise, it arrives as confirmation. Over the next few days, I watched silently. I listened, I remembered. He began using words with me that felt recycled, lines that no longer belonged to us. Compliments that sounded practiced, even his affection felt borrowed. Then I found the receipts, a hotel bill folded carelessly in his jacket pocket, a restaurant I had never been to, a gold bracelet tucked inside a drawer too delicate, too young, too unfamiliar to be mine. I held it in my hand for a long time. I didn't cry. I just felt something break quietly inside me. I looked her up. She was not the monster I had imagined. She was beautiful in a soft, effortless way, educated, ambitious. Someone who posted motivational quotes about integrity and self-respect. The irony made me nauseous. Then came the final wound. I recognized her. She was the woman I had helped. Months ago, my husband had mentioned a colleague struggling financially. I had encouraged him to help her. I had even suggested opportunities, spoken kindly of her, praised her strength. I had unknowingly supported the woman who was sleeping with my husband. That realization hurt more than the affair itself. I remembered her smile when she met me briefly at a work dinner. How she had touched my arm and called me so graceful. How she had thanked me for being understanding. Understanding. I laughed out loud that night. A hollow, cracked sound that startled even me. I went into the bathroom and locked the door. I sat on the cold floor, hugging my knees, pressing my mouth shut to keep the screams inside. I didn't want the walls to hear me break. I thought about the old woman, about her trembling hands, about the courage it must have taken to destroy my peace just to give me truth. I finally understood her tears. By morning, something had changed. The woman who woke up was not the one who had answered the door days earlier. She no longer wanted explanations. She no longer wanted apologies. She wanted clarity. I began to save everything. Messages, screenshots, bank statements. I wrote dates, times, lies, and as I gathered proof, my grief slowly transformed into something colder, something sharper. Betrayal had taken my innocence, but it had given me vision. I learned very quickly that silence can be louder than screaming. In the days that followed, I became an actress in my own life. I smiled at the right moments. I asked about his day. I served dinner warm and on time. I laughed at his jokes, even when my chest felt hollow. If guilt lived inside him, it didn't surface. He moved through our home with the confidence of a man who believed his secret was safe. And I let him believe that. Every night when he slept beside me, I stared at his face in the dark and studied it like a stranger. I memorized the curve of his mouth, the rise of his chest, the way his hand reached for me unconsciously. I wondered how love could look so peaceful while being so dishonest. During the day, I rebuilt myself quietly. I reopened the bank account I had abandoned after marriage. I reviewed documents I had trusted him to manage. I read legal articles late into the night, learning words like entitlement and evidence. Knowledge steadied me. Each fact I gathered stitched a piece of my dignity back into place. He noticed changes, but misunderstood them. "You seem calmer," he said one evening, sipping tea. I smiled. "I am. He took it as surrender. Meanwhile, I began to see the affair not as a wound, but as information. Every lie he told me taught me something about his fear. Every secret transaction revealed how carefully he protected his double life. I no longer asked questions. I listened. I observed how he dressed better on certain days, how his mood lifted after specific calls, how his irritation with me grew whenever his other life demanded more of him. The pattern was clear, predictable, human. What surprised me most was my own strength. I had expected to collapse, to beg, to rage. Instead, I felt myself hardening not into bitterness, but into clarity. I stopped seeking affection from him. I stopped measuring my worth through his attention. I poured that energy back into myself. I went for long walks alone. I sat in cafes with books I had once postponed reading. I remembered who I had been before I became someone's wife. There was a woman inside me who had dreams beyond loyalty. At night, when the pain resurfaced, I didn't fight it. I let it wash over me, then pass. Grief, I learned, doesn't disappear when ignored. It transforms when acknowledged. Sometimes I thought of the old woman again. She had looked so relieved when she spoke the truth, as if confession had lightened her final days. I wondered if her daughter knew the price her mother had paid to protect a stranger's dignity. I wondered if love, when corrupted, always demanded sacrifice from the innocent. One evening, my husband reached for my hand. "You're distant," he said. "Is something wrong?" I met his eyes steadily. "No," I replied. "I'm just thinking." He accepted that answer easily. He always had. That was the moment I understood something essential. People who betray rely on your silence, but they fear your awareness. And I was fully aware now. I didn't want revenge soaked in anger. I wanted something cleaner, something undeniable. I began to prepare, not for confrontation, but for departure. I imagined my future without him and felt no panic. Only relief. I envisioned a life where I did not have to compete for honesty, where I did not have to doubt my own intuition. The image felt peaceful. By the end of the week, I had everything I needed: proof, stability, resolve. He still believed I was his wife. In reality, I had already left. Silence wasn't my weakness. It was my weapon. The day I chose to speak, I didn't raise my voice. There was no shaking, no tears, no dramatic exit. I woke up early, made breakfast, and packed my bag while my husband slept peacefully, unaware that the life he had balanced so carelessly was about to collapse under the weight of truth. I left the folder on the dining table. Inside it were copies of messages, hotel bills, bank transfers, and photographs, neatly organized, labeled undeniable. I wasn't exposing him out of cruelty. I was giving him what he had denied me for so long: clarity. When he finally opened it, I watched his face change. Confusion came first, then fear, then the slow realization that lies, once documented, lose their power. "This isn't what it looks like," he began. I raised my hand gently. "I know exactly what it looks like." My calm unsettled him more than anger ever could. He searched my face for forgiveness, for weakness, for the woman who once believed love meant endurance. She was gone. I know about her. I continued. I know about the money. I know about the promises you made in the dark and denied in daylight. He reached for me. I stepped back. "I don't want explanations," I said softly. "I wanted honesty. You chose comfort instead." By noon, the truth had reached where it needed to go. His family, people who had once praised our marriage, saw the evidence. His workplace, where reputation mattered more than apologies, began to distance itself. Not because I demanded punishment, but because truth creates consequences without effort. And she tried to contact me. She sent messages filled with justification and regret, speaking of love and confusion, of loneliness and mistakes. I didn't reply. Some conversations are not meant to continue. Accountability does not require dialogue. I thought of her mother then, the old woman who had stood in the rain and handed me the truth like a fragile offering. I hoped she was at peace. I hoped she knew her courage had not been wasted. That evening I returned to the house one last time. It no longer felt like home. It felt like a place I had survived. My husband sat in silence, surrounded by the wreckage of his choices. He looked smaller somehow, not because he had lost me, but because he had finally met himself. "I never thought you would leave," he said. I nodded. I know. That was the most honest sentence we had shared in years. I didn't tell him I still felt pain. I didn't tell him betrayal lingers even after justice. Some truths are private. Healing does not need witnesses. As I walked away, the weight I had carried for months lifted. Not because revenge tasted sweet, but because freedom did. Outside, the air felt different. Lighter, I breathed deeply as if for the first time. I didn't win by destroying anyone. I won by choosing myself. Later, I stood alone on my balcony in my new apartment, watching the city lights flicker like quiet promises. My life was no longer perfect, but it was honest. And honesty, I learned, is the greatest form of peace. Somewhere, an old woman had told the truth before leaving this world, and because of her, I began again.